We're talking about leadership, but not leadership in the way that you traditionally hear it spoken about. We're actually talking about the life side of things, the things away from your job, the things behind the success that actually really matter. Have a special guest with me today. Thomas, how about you share a little bit with our audience about why we feel it's relevant, especially for men, to start to focus on the self leadership piece?
It's a really good question. I mean, my journey, so I'm been in finance for 15 years now, financial advisor. Still have a financial practice, but focusing predominantly and more so on the coaching side of the equation now. And I think what we tend to do as humans is compartmentalize everything. And that's probably the biggest issue that I've seen when we talk about dealing with men's leadership in a way that's different is there's a lot of programs out there, there's a lot of conversations out there about men leading in work and business and how they build enterprises and build corporations and all of those kind of things. But what I've tended to notice over the last 15 years of working with couples is that there'll be men who, and not just men, but predominantly we're talking about men that produce and create and have power and leadership and work, and then they come home and they don't know how to channel that same energy. They don't know how to actually lead in the household. They have a hard day at work or a long day at work and it's a difficult situation. They pull some amazing maneuvers that save a company millions of dollars, and then they come home and the first thing that happens is their wife tells them about how terrible her day was or how difficult it was with the kids, and starts to, oh great, you're home, let me give you all these things to do. And the thought that sometimes runs through the head is, well, where's, like, man, like I was so respected 5 minutes ago, and now I step into this space and like nothing I do seems to matter. And there's not many conversations, or as many as I'd like to see, bridging the gap between those two conversations. And so you see a lot of really wealthy, successful men going through divorces, dealing with infidelity, sedating with alcohol, and scrolling on their phone or video games or things of that nature because they don't know how to deal with that dynamic at home. I saw that so much in my financial practice that I was like, what if I started coaching on this aspect? And then as I
Got
started
it.
thinking about coaching on this aspect, I had to do a really hard thing, Brian, which is I had to look at, how am I leading? That was not a fun experience. That was a very unfortunate, it was, I learned a lot from it, but man, turning the mirror around and looking at myself and going, whoa, I'm not doing any of these things I've noticed need to be done.
And that's an important point, Tom. It's just talking about how you show up, right? And I think that's one of the key components that gets overlooked. And again, as you talked about, there is this persona, this perception, this power that you may have in the corporate space when you're doing that thing. But how do you translate that to the home environment? And what's interesting is the mindsets that we tell ourselves. And I think that's the part of it that you got to realize too. I'm making great money, I'm being a good provider, etc., etc. But
Yeah.
then are you actually present in that home life, right? And
Yeah.
somehow we get this dichotomy going of, well, I'm providing, I'm making plenty of money. That should, lack of a better way to say it, be enough, right?
Right.
But it's not. And then you figure out, well, why do we have this disconnect at home, or why is there this tension that's there? We seem to be swimming in two different directions, and it's really all about how you're actually showing up in the relationships that actually probably matter the most in life
Yeah.
versus the success side of it. So, about your just whatever you're willing to share about your personal journey,
Yeah.
and kind of how you had to process your way through getting to that point of picking up the mirror and going, holy,
Yeah.
and yeah,
It was a painful journey dragging myself across broken glass, and stepping on hot coals and all that. Metaphorically, but yeah, man, it was difficult. One thing to say about what you said is a catchphrase or saying that really lands for me is that a lot of times we think as men that the paycheck will be in lieu of the presence, but the paycheck never replaces the presence, and that's a difficult scenario to actually realize because we're supposed to be the provider. That's the societal role, But the more you provide, for most men, the less present that they are in the home. And ultimately, that's what matters most. But a lot of times they're blind to that. And then the question becomes, well, how do I do both? That's where there becomes a lot of difficulty. Well, difficulty if you're not actually creating frameworks and strategies like we were talking about earlier. My personal journey, I mean, I've been in finance for 15 years. I got out of college, I went right into finance, and I thought it was all math and numbers. I'm like, oh, I understand all the math and the numbers and the science of this stuff, so I can teach this stuff, and then start getting clients who just don't understand the math and the numbers, and life will be better. And then I started working with people, and I'm like, wow, math and numbers don't mean jack. Like they're not making any decisions based on math or numbers. It's completely off of emotions and instincts and biases and perspectives from previous issues that have happened. I remember distinctly one conversation I had with a lady where it was a budgeting conversation, and she was sharing. I asked her about her past, and she shared that her mom and dad got divorced. Her mom worked 3 jobs. She felt like she never got to see her mom. So now that she's working and making money, and her husband's working and making money, they spend all their money on their kids because they want their kids to never experience what she experienced without having her mom there to actually have those adventures with. And I'm like, man, this budgeting conversation isn't going to solve that problem. Like that's a deeper rooted conversation that has to occur, but the traditional finance world doesn't deal with that. So that was the initial like awakening. And then I got married, and I used to blame, this is one of the things guys do that I definitely did, was I used to blame her for all of our difficulties without realizing I had power to say no. So she used to spend tons of, I'd make a bunch of money. She'd go and spend the money. Anytime I would try to say, hey, listen, we got to be more intentional here, or we can't just like live on whims. She would say, oh, you're trying to control me like my ex. And then I would go, oh, I don't want to do that. So I would, take my foot off the gas and just watch the accounts deplete. And I'm doing all this hard work and having all these meetings and watching the account deplete. And I started to get burnt out. And as I got burnt out, I started to disengage. As I disengaged, I was no longer present. And so my lack of leadership had her lose the presence. And then when she lost the presence, she found it elsewhere. Now, I'm not saying like I'm at peace with it, but and I'm not saying that any of that was the way it should have been. Like she should have been working through the money, or she should have cheated, or any of that kind of stuff. But it's a natural byproduct of a lack of leadership. And so I own that I didn't lead that relationship. And I think that that's where a lot of guys get stuck, is they don't take that ownership. So that was the first relationship. Then I got married again, and I've noticed a similar pattern of disengagement on my side. Whereas things would get tough, I would disengage. As problems would exist, I would be passive aggressive and kind of make her the reason behind them. Finances got difficult, I'd have it be her spending that was the issue. There's a lot of like similarities that way. So as I started to realize and look at my clients, there's 4 domains I break down into for conversation purposes with people. There's the body domain, like taking care of your body. There's the being domain, your spiritual connection, your purpose, your connection to God, whatever you ultimately want to call it. There's your balance domain, which is your relationships. And then there's your business domain, your ability to make money and produce wealth. And what I started to notice was my business domain was good, but all other domains were terrible. Like my body, I was 41% body fat. I was 260 pounds. The balance domain, we were constantly at each other, and I blamed her for everything. And then the being domain, I was burnt out again. I didn't have purpose. I didn't have clarity. I didn't have a connection with God. I definitely didn't trust any kind of spiritual conversations or spiritual connections. And then I started looking at my clients. I'm like, God, no wonder. Like as a leader, I'm a beacon. So the people I'm having as clients are having the exact same issues, of course. And I can't speak to it because I've got no personal power. That was the hardest look, like in the mirror, like looking at my body and then looking at the relationship and going, man, if I'm responsible, then this is all on me. And I can't keep blaming other people. Oh
So
man, that was painful.
let me ask this question because a common theme that I hear in what you're describing really revolves around trust. But
Yeah,
it's interesting because it's not really trust in others, it's actually trust within yourself. Um, and just from the
yeah,
standpoint of owning it, trusting that what you're feeling, what you're thinking is worthy, it's legitimate, but then following suit and following through on those things from a trust and belief standpoint. What are your thoughts about that, and what's the relevance of having that type of just self trust?
yeah. That's a really good question. I think I think most people don't know how to trust themselves. Well, first off, like it's not something you can teach. It's not like trust yourself 101, right? Like a, like a course in college. I think trust comes with a willingness to be introspective. I think it comes with a willingness to look at where you're responsible for the patterns in your life. You know, like relationally, someone that keeps having the same money problems over and over in different capacities. It's the willingness to look at, well, where am I responsible for this compared to, wow, I can't believe this keeps happening. So if I'm living in the frame of victimhood where it all keeps happening to me, then there is no trust available because I'm just the victim of circumstances. But if I look at it from the lens of, well, where am I responsible? Where am I responsible for the last couple of relationships cheating on me? Where am I responsible for, the health issues I'm having? Where am I responsible for the reason I can't seem to make money, no matter what I try to do? That's a window into starting to break the pattern. And that's a place where someone can start to trust. There is no trust without accountability and responsibility. You can never trust yourself if you don't know yourself as someone who's responsible and accountable. Why would you? Because there's no way to trust yourself if everything is happening to you and you're just in the sea of it happening. Because then if you were to trust yourself at that point, you have to admit, well, I had something to do with this.
That's an important point. Just the fact of the self accountability piece of it, and being introspective enough and honest enough with yourself to say, what role did I play in whatever's going on, financial things,
Yeah.
marital things, etc. Instead of, as they say, always pointing outward. How about we take some of that reflective time to really start to look inward and understand, maybe how you're being perceived. And again, like we talked about at the beginning of this, how are you actually showing up or not? Because most times that's
Right.
what the issue is you're just not showing up in a way that feeds and nurtures the relationship that you're in. And so I think that's the key point. And again, dollars and cents are great. And it actually, as we all know, it makes life easier. But that's
Yep.
not what life is all about, especially when you talk about those types of relationships.